weekend with Driving with Loewy. It is 8:40 a.m. and we are headed, let's see, we're headed, which way are we headed? We're headed south on Swangataha Drive. We're going to pop up back with you. Okay, welcome back to Facebook Live. Looks like what happened was down in the valley there in South Swangataha, you know, Verizon couldn't cover us. So I apologize. Want to say good morning to Facebook viewers. It is Friday and just before 9 o'clock. I've got a busy day. I'm sure you do too. Get out, get done, get out for the weekend maybe. But wanted to talk a little bit about today, about the column that I wrote for today, and talk a little bit about it was really cool. First thing I saw in my Facebook feed today was Debbie Devlin posted a happy birthday to Cameron Crowe, and it had a JPEG or whatever, a picture of the poster for Fast Times at Ridgemont High, which for a lot of people over the age of 40, maybe over the age of 50, not sure, but for a lot of people in the over 40 set, Fast Times at Ridgemont High obviously is a very popular film. So I got to thinking, you know, I started thinking about Almost Famous, which is kind of a really great movie about kind of a rock band, right? And then I started thinking, well, what else has he done? And I wasn't even thinking about this, but Cameron Crowe directed the John Cusack, probably the ultimate John Cusack as a teenager movie, and that's Say Anything. And Say Anything is probably the ultimate teenage male movie about a guy being in love with a young woman and doing anything to convince her of that. Say Anything is the very famous movie where he stands outside her window or outside her house and holds up the boombox. And it's actually a very cool movie. It's a really cool movie. And most of his movies, he did singles. He did not a ton of films. Fast Times at Ridgemont High was his breakout. I think his first film was a teen movie called Wild Weekend, which was more marketed, you know. Fast Times at Ridgemont High is probably the penultimate movie of teenagers behaving badly. So, happy birthday, Cameron Crowe. You are remembered. Your films, in my mind, Fast Times at Ridgemont High obviously introduces the world to Jeff Spicoli and the stoner surfer, well, I guess stoner skateboarder maybe character. He had hints of skateboarder with the Vans and stuff, but he definitely was iconic. And then Say Anything with the iconic, you know, I don't know what kind of genre that would be, but you know, the guy's in love with the woman who's not quite in love with him, maybe. You know, and of course the standing outside her window was a great scene. And then Almost Famous, which is probably, you know, kind of a rock groupie, but a great movie about an almost band. Band that almost made it. And about rock journalism in a lot of ways. There's little there's little hints of things about rock journalism with Philip Seymour Hoffman playing Lester Bangs in an incredible, like, 7-minute performance in film. I'm going to get my coffee at Hardee's today, and we're going to kind of cruise around. So, Davey Devlin, nice call on the happy birthday to Cameron Crowe. I liked that a lot. Okay, filling up my email inbox today, I decided to write about Don Moffitt, and the reason I wrote about him is because I got a chance to sit with him for the better part of an hour at the Knox County Fair, and we talked about everything, which is always good. We talked about everything from some of the gun violence going on to his admiration of Ronald Reagan and our shared admiration of Jim Edgar. Jim Edgar was my first kind of political hero, like that I didn't read about in books. You know, I moved to Illinois when I was a teenager. Jim Edgar was the governor, and I thought he was a just man, and a thoughtful man, and a thoughtful leader. Forgive me just a second, I got to get my coffee. Maybe. But
would you like to try a load on your biscuit?
You know what? I'm not going to do that, but I would like a large coffee with half ice, please. And that's all, thanks. Thank you. All right. Okay, so I was a admirer of Edgar, and we talked about that. Another thing we talked about was kind of the lack of civility in political discourse, that everything is very much about choosing a side and just sticking to that side. Obviously, Don Moffitt and I don't agree. He tends to be more of a I guess if you had to classify him as a political conservative, but what he was for me was a representative who, for the most part, always listened to people and took those concerns and actually listened to people about their concerns about things that needed to change, about the help they needed, and he actually took that and tried to worked to make people's lives better. I disagreed 5 years ago now, in 2013, I disagreed with him to my core about his vote against marriage equality. And so the column is about struggling to reconcile something that I think is so very basic and important with also a man who I think is just and upright. Can he still be that even though he cast that vote? And I don't know all the answers. I know what my personal answer is. I know that I'm not a gay person, and I don't have any. If I want to get married, I go down to the county courthouse, you know, and that's an awful nice luxury, a nice privilege to have. So I don't know how a gay person might feel about Don Moffitt and his vote. You should definitely ask someone about that. I can only go from my perspective to say that I felt he served this community really, really well. And the time he didn't, I called him out on it, and that's all I can do. But the question is, I think for a lot of people, is can you continue to, you know, where does that stand? Do you throw Don Moffitt out because of a vote? And I don't know. I can't do that personally. I don't want to live in that kind of a divided world. Don Moffitt didn't segregate people. Don Moffitt didn't, you know, he voted against this issue. And so I have to have a kind of real world evaluation with that. And in the end, why do I have to have that? It's because I want to be able to sit down with him. And I want other people to be able to sit down with me. You know, I might not agree with everyone on gun control, right? But are you going to throw out everything I say because we disagree on that? And I think that's the temptation of today, is like, you don't agree with me about God, so you're done. And we never talk again. And I think Facebook has kind of fostered that. I think social media has kind of fostered that. I mean, again, I think they're, you know, if I was killing gun owners or, you know, actively trying to segregate gun owners into, you know, a disused Walmart or an unused Walmart, an empty Walmart, that would be maybe a deal breaker, right? But I mean, we're talking about trying to find common ground, or at least we used to talk about that. Now we kind of tend to maybe find reasons to not talk to one another, to not sit at picnic tables, look each other in the eye, and hash stuff out. You know, so that's what that column's about. You know, as I said, I stand by what I wrote about Moffitt's vote in 2013. I'm not going to back down from that because he's a nice guy. He is a genuinely nice guy, and I admire him in a lot of ways. And so what I have to do as a human being in a complex world where people don't agree with me 100% is I have to find a way to get along and get through. And that's what's important. Forgive me for just a second. Hey, I'm on Facebook Live. I'm not just talking to myself. Yeah, I won't point it at you.
Why are you on live?
Oh, because I do this thing called Loewy driving. And so, like, I drive to work and talk to people about, like, news of the day or what I've written about or whatever. Sounds like a stupid idea.
Tell him you stopped at Hardee's and seen me.
What'd you say?
Tell him you stopped at Hardee's and got coffee.
Stop at Hardee's and come see you, huh? All right. You take care. See you, Kim.
Yep.
All right. That was Kimberly. She said stop at Hardee's and see her. Get a coffee. With or without ice. So, you know, I want to find common ground with people. I really do, because I don't want to have a Facebook friends list of 30,000 and actual, you know, no friends except myself and my own ideas, quite frankly. And I think that's where, obviously that's extreme, but we are already, you know, people talk about polarization. Well, it's all true, probably. You know, we're as polarized maybe as we've been since the civil rights era, the active civil rights era, the late 50s into the 60s, and the strife of, you know, the peace movements and things like that. There's a lot of bad things going on. There are a lot of, you know, they're talking about making laws against protesting. And that's incredible to me, to live in a world after what we've come out of in the previous decades, to the fact that anyone would entertain a law against any other person protesting is anathema to me. And so, you know, you either want to live in a free society or you don't. That's the cut and dried answer. And a free society requires, in the end, the ability to sit down at a picnic table with someone who sees the world differently than you do and finding a way to work it out. That's what a free society, in the end, really requires. And while we're capable of posting really funny memes and making people laugh and making people cry and making people outraged, are we capable of doing anything that's real? Because posting memes is not real. I do it. I freely admit that I do it. But I step back sometimes and I think, what does this really accomplish? Besides, you know, ticking off half the people on my friends list and making the other half of my friends list laugh. And I think it's something that you can think about. Think this weekend, or maybe you want to write something down in the comments section. But how many times do you sit with people who don't think like you do and actually talk to them? I know I don't do it enough. And the times that I do, for the most part, I feel better afterwards. I'm not sitting down with Klan members. I'm not entertaining the bigoted at my house. What I'm doing is I'm trying to understand a guy like Don Moffitt, who's not a Klan member and who is not bigoted, does not act in bigoted ways. So I hope all of you get a chance to think about it. Filling up my inbox today after I wrote about, you know, resurrected Moffitt's vote and our sit together and talking not a lot, but I got 7 or 8, I think, emails about God. And that Moffitt was right, because God ordains that, God ordains that marriage is between a man and a woman. And, I don't have a lot to say about God, frankly. I don't claim to know him or her or it. And so I'm not going to tell you about your God. That would be pretty stupid. And I'm not going to argue with you about your God. All I can tell you is that we live in a society that is bound by the laws that we all agree upon together. And we strive to make that a secular society, because there are a lot of different religions out there. And there are a lot of different people who interpret a lot of different gods. A lot. And that's fine. That's absolutely fine. I'm not going to tell you what God to believe in or what your God says to you. But at the same time, what your God says to you is not what our laws say to each other. It's not appropriate. It's not appropriate to make laws based on a person's interpretation of their faith, of their belief, of their spiritual bearing. Okay? And that's how we live in a modern society. That's how we try to get along with the fact that there's Lutherans and Catholics and Muslims and Jews and every other in between. And I want to live in a world respectful of your religion, but I would like your religion to be respectful of the fact that we have a greater society, and we have to find a way to forge living covenants with people, living laws that allow us to coexist. That's what we have to do. So, people want to know why I don't understand the laws of God, or why Don Moffitt would believe the way that he believes about gay marriage. Okay? And all I can say is I try to understand that, but in the end, any laws that are exclusionary, that prevent people from realizing the rights that everyone else has, gay people, by asking for the right to have their marriages recognized by the state, are not asking for special rights. They're asking for the same rights that you have. They're not asking to be recognized as a special group of people, as gay people, or whatever. They're, in point of fact, asking to become part of the fabric of the greater society. And if we don't recognize that, then we failed. We fail ourselves, and we fail other people when we exclude for no other reason than, orientation, or, again, as I've written before, what if enough Catholics got together and decided that Lutherans can't get married? Which wouldn't happen, right? Lutherans are close in doctrine. Maybe decided that Jews can't get married. It's exclusionary. There used to be groups that decided where Jews could live. If they found out you were Jewish, they'd encourage you to not move to certain areas. Has anyone ever heard of redlining, where banks actively prevented African Americans from moving into certain areas, from preventing Hispanic peoples from moving into certain areas, certain neighborhoods? I mean, is this the day and age that we'd like to go back to? When an African American woman couldn't marry a Caucasian male? Do we know about the Loving case? I mean, our world's not going to be perfect, but hopefully we can move forward. And heaven help us if we start moving backwards, right? So, we stayed kind of on the south side of town, and we are talking about Don Moffitt. We were talking about Cameron Crowe, and we're talking about people writing and asking me about God, which I'm probably more unqualified to talk about than any other subject. So, it is Friday. I hope you have some food for thought for the weekend. I hope you get a chance to sit down sometime and talk to somebody who doesn't think like you do. Or start up a Facebook conversation with people who don't think like you do. And let me be very clear. You know, I've gotten in plenty of arguments on Facebook. I don't think I'm better than anybody else. I'm just as triggered as anybody out there. But when you step back, and when I step back from it, I'm like, well, what did I accomplish there? You know? And so it felt good to sit with a human being and talk about things and listen to him talk about the world as he sees it. So, Facebook followers, I'm probably going to join you tomorrow morning. I've got to drive. I drive every weekend for an hour up to pick up a kid, and so I'm going to spend part of that drive with you. We'll talk about, kind of recap the news of the week and things going on. I hope you've enjoyed this drive. I really want to thank you for spending time with me. This is an off-the-cuff, you know, I don't do any notes. I don't do any preparation. I guess I don't know if I should admit that, but it's kind of a stream of consciousness. I kind of want to I kind of want to recreate, you know, what might go through our minds as we're driving. And just kind of speak that out to you, and maybe it jumpstarts your stream of consciousness. Maybe it gets you thinking about some different issues. So I appreciate the time you spend with me. Thanks for making it. And I will talk to Facebook viewers again tomorrow morning. Thanks a lot.